I like to just name that IFS in general is we differentiate first and attach second, as opposed to the other way around. So when we're talking about differentiation, we're talking about from inside to out, how couples, when I am first starting with a couple, I'm really listening to how much fusion, how much individuation we have in the room. You know, those people that you say, "How are you?" and they look at their partner to find out. You know that one?
Say that again.
Well, you say to somebody, like I say to Joanne, "How are you, Joanne?" And Joanne looks to you to find out how she is. That's an indicator that, that there might be a lack of differentiation there. Also, a lack of differentiation is where someone is not attuning to their partner at all, and they're staying only with themselves. So that's also a lack of differentiation. So in IFS to IFIO, we're working with internal differentiation. That's the unblending, the process of learning and helping people to unblend, and then to connect and have their parts attach internally so that they can return and have more ability to attach to their partner. So within the definition of differentiation lives attachment.
Say that one more time.
Okay, so within the definition of differentiation lives the word attachment. So the definition of differentiation, the way I see it, is for individuals to be able to both individuate and connect, especially in times of high conflict or stress. I mean, when everything's going well, it's much easier to say, I'm free to be myself because you're letting me be myself, right? Finally, there's someone who's letting me be myself. And what we want to encourage is you can be yourself regardless of what your partner's doing or saying or thinking about you. And this is a very tall order for people, right? So if I can be myself, I might be able to bring self to the relationship. So, sometimes I have thought often about writing an article about this, but I'm sure somebody has done it already, which is that, we are born in our brain. And I've heard Dan Siegel talk about this. The drive for individuation is as strong as the drive for connection. I think the conversation has gotten out of balance somehow. That it's all about the drive for connection, but, we really have a drive for individuation as well. But what happens as children grow, what I've observed in my office over and over again is the drive for individuation becomes distorted into over-independence, right? Like, I'm going to lose myself, so I'm going to become rigidly independent. And that turns into some distancing and some avoiding, right? That's not differentiated. That's avoidant. You following what I'm saying? So that individuation gets distorted into avoidance. On the other hand, you have connection can get distorted into fusion. Does that make sense? So, and I think a slippery slope for couple therapists is when one person is talking about wanting to be connected, and we listen to that part as though they are the healthy one in the relationship. And we don't know that yet, right? Because that connection could be, I can't live without you, as opposed to, I miss you, I want you, that kind of thing. So we want to listen to that. But I think that can get, I think couple therapists can get drawn to the person who is the one talking about, you don't connect, I want to connect, we're, whatever. So the metaphor that I love and I'm using, and I'm sure that you've all heard this, but I'm just going to remind you again, is that of the aspen tree, which is that they grow where I live. And the aspen tree is a tree that every grove of aspen trees, and it could be hundreds of miles of aspen trees, their root system is connected. They can't survive without each other. So they're connected at the root, but they grow up side by side. So that's that's how I hold what we're doing for couples. Connection and the ability to also be an individual tree. You're an individual person with your own feelings, dreams, hopes, fears. And as people begin to differentiate, their conversation changes because I'm listening to you for you as opposed to I'm listening to you for what I've projected onto you all these years. That makes sense? And this is not a culture where necessarily children are raised to be differentiated. In our culture in general, as we can know just by listening to the world news, is same is good and different is threatening. And so we want to help people undo that actually different is fantastic. And different can enhance your relationship. There's safety in the same. There's safety in being like somebody else. And that message is given overtly and covertly, I think, and hopefully changing, with each generation that's changing. But you know what I'm talking about? Your difference is so fantastic in this family, as opposed to, couldn't you be more like your sister or brother, So just different messages, about how same is safer and different is dangerous. And so I really want to unpack that with couples over time, that actually if you can embrace your partner's difference, this will enhance the relationship and vice versa. And if you can enhance your own difference, it will also enhance the relationship. So what happens is also, could you be different so I don't have to? And my favorite line in the Intimacy from the Inside Out book of all time, that whole book, is we are not offering couples this sentence: we're going to help your partner change so you don't have to. It's my favorite line in that book. So the idea is not exactly what you're saying, that we're going to get with changing somebody so you can feel more secure on the inside. Now, change is going to have to happen, so we're not saying that. But the invitation to change is about growth and, growth as an individual and a couple, not you have to change so somebody else can be more comfortable with you. Does that make sense? We can invite our partners into change with us for the relationship. But this is very different than the expectation. Hopefully over time, couples, partners will influence each other. I mean, we want that. We want people to influence each other, to be available to shift and change, to support the other person, and to help grow the relationship. I think you're catching my drift, right? Okay. And we're working with people where they are. I'm not going to jump into it right now, but I'm going to talk, and hopefully the staff also will talk about some of the complex couple systems that they're working with, and how you got to get in there with them, and it can be extremely challenging. And that's one where somebody is a very concrete thinker, and they may need something very different than what you think that you have to offer, so that you can invite their parts to come along, but in different ways. So it's meeting people where they are in a certain kind of way, and to watch our own judgment about a concrete thinker. It's not a bad thing; it's a different thing. Okay. So, principles of IFIO: secure inner attachment supports security in the relationship. So that's what I've just been talking about. Feeling unsafe in a relationship will activate protectors. And we're going to be talking much more about that tomorrow, but remember that when people sit down in your office, probably they're not feeling safe. And in a new situation with you, there is no reason why protectors should feel safe with you. I mean, your kind face is really nice. Your reputation from other people that they've heard about you, hopefully, is great. But there's no reason in the world why protectors should feel safe with us. And I think it's important to remember that and to hold that when you're starting a therapy session. So if people are coming to therapy, usually it's because they don't feel safe with each other. And now they don't necessarily feel safe with you, but you're the authority, so they have to pull up a part who's going to behave, at least for the first session or two, right? I don't usually have people blow in the very first session. And the story that I've made up about that is because they have parts that respect authority at least a little bit, that the blow comes a little bit later. So if protectors are chronically running the relationship, this is an unsafe relationship, and this is what we're working with a lot, is exiles that feel disconnected and unsafe, and a nervous system that is chronically overactive because of that, and protectors that are kind of running the show. That's who we're generally working with in the beginning. Right? And what we know is that speaking for or from vulnerability increases the possibility of empathy and compassion and more safety. So that's part of our journey, right? Is helping couples go from protection to vulnerability. Because my experience is that when people are able to speak directly from a vulnerable place, and not distance themselves from their vulnerability, it's much more inviting to their partner. That when people start, we're going to talk more about unblending, but there is this thing that happens that I observe, which is too much unblending from vulnerability. And that's not that inviting in my experience. That it's coming from that vulnerability that invites people into softening, not all the time. But most of the time. That answer? Yeah, okay. And self-presence of the therapist is the key here, which we know, right? Continuing to be able to access your own self-energy, to be in touch with your own vulnerability, to understand about unblending, to know when you are blended, to know when you are speaking from frustration, right? To really to be able to track your own system. So self-leadership is the goal. We do have a goal. We do have agendas and we do have goals in this method. And inherent in self-leadership, when people begin to differentiate on the inside, inherent to these qualities of self are love, connectedness, kindness, clarity, open-heartedness, and I do believe that even if couples are choosing not to stay together, there is a way to help them to make this decision from a place of self. And when we have more self, we have more access to choices. I think this is the big invitation to people over and over and over again, is that blended with protectors equals no empowerment and no choice. You following what I'm saying? Once we're blended with protectors, your choices are cut off to yourself. Because what are the choices of protectors? What do they choose? Safety. They want to win. Who are they wanting to get safe from? The other person, right? Yeah, the partner. So their project is to keep me safe, not Jordan safe. Jordan's on his own, according to my protectors. He has plenty of protectors to keep him safe, says my protector, right? So less reactivity, more choices, big one, And hopefully that will lead to, if people are going to stay together, more intimacy, more creativity, more exploration, and a safer place to bring yourself. A safer place to allow yourself to be intimate and close and know and be known by someone else. And within this, which I don't have on this slide, when I teach in countries where I'm being translated, I have lots and lots of time in between my sentences to think about the next sentence, right? And I was in France last year, and I thought, okay, I really want to get clearer with these guys about this, that ultimately, we want to help people to do all of this so that they start to change their conversations. And their conversations then can include speaking about what's not working, what is working, what I want that's different than you, and starting to make choices and think about the relationship in a very different way. Does that make sense? So changing people, helping people change their conversation, regardless of the subject, whether it's staying or leaving or parenting or grocery shopping or, my need for safety, my need for security, my need for love, being able to speak and listen about all of those deeper longings in a safe way.